Good afternoon and welcome to Live with the Brand. My name is Ken Eifred, Executive Account Manager for the Mid-Central region and the host for this new and exciting series. We are live from the Culinary Center at the headquarters of Certified Angus Beef in beautiful Worcester, Ohio. We've got everything you need to operate a restaurant, including a state-of-the-art meat lab. If you're just joining us, this series was created for operators such as yourself to show some new and exciting ways to offer and market premium beef and also drive profitability. In our first episode, we looked at the chuck roll and we broke it down a few different ways and pulled out a whole bevy of different steaks that you can come from a pretty economically priced piece of meat. Today, we've got another excellent food service cut, the top sirloin. There's a ton of delicious steaks found in the top bite, and a lot of profitability there as well. Quick note here for all our guests out there, please utilize the chat feature. We want to encourage questions, and we have some time for some Q&A later. And remember, if you've got the question, there's likely another person that has that exact same question, so please utilize that chat box. Now, before we get our hands on some product, I'd like to bring up our Director of Packing, Mr. Clint Wallencheck. Clint has 20 years in that role with Certified Angus Beef, and he knows the beef market inside and out. Clint's going to spend a few minutes talking about what you can expect from the top sirloin market right now and in the weeks and months to come. Clint, welcome to Live with the Brand.
Well, thanks, Ken. You know, before we get to the main event of the show, as Kim mentioned, we want to spend some time talking about price. And really there's a couple of main points that we want to lay out just to kind of provide some groundwork for you to have in the back of your mind as we go through some of the cutting and the rest of the discussion here this afternoon. The first point really is when we talk about that middle meat category, similar to the chuck roll and the end meats, the middle meat category, the top sirloin butt really is that value cut. And so when we look at a 5-year average of historical pricing, if we could bring that graphic up, you really see that this item trades in a pretty tight range. So that 5-year average showing about a range between $3 and $4 over the course of the year. Now, the other point I'd like to make is there's absolutely some seasonality in there. There's some high and low points that tend to be fairly repeatable over the course of the year. And so, you as an operator and working in coordination with your distributor, it may represent some opportunities for you to capitalize on some of that seasonality. The other part, I think it's important to point out, and I should make sure that everybody understands, keeping in mind that the pricing that we're looking at here would be that initial true wholesale price. So before any of the product has had any mileage or any additional service applied to it or anything like that. And this would be for those whole top butts that we'll talk about. But the final point would be volatility. So that seasonality is something that if you can kind of study that and work again with your supplier to capitalize on that. When we compare the volatility seen on the top sirloin, we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of about plus or minus 15%, let's say, over the course of the year. And that's compared to your ribs, strips, and tenderloin items that may see as much as 30, 40, or even 50% volatility over the course of the year. So there's a lot of attractive things, I think, that when we look at this top sirloin market overall that make it a pretty attractive item beyond the performance that we'll get into here later. So with that, I will turn it over to our dynamic duo, our meat scientist team of Diana and Daniel.
Awesome. Well, it's just great to have everyone here. We're so excited to have you back. And if you missed the first session, where were you? Seriously, we were waiting for you the whole time. But we're glad that you joined in this time. Okay? And we're going to go ahead and break down these top sirloins that we have here in front of us. I think I'm going to let Daniel go ahead and start.
Yeah, so the top sirloin really has two main muscles that are associated with it. We got the biceps femoris below and the gluteus medius muscle right there, if you're talking Latin terms, just for fun.
So what are those if you're don't know Latin?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So this right here is actually, and we're going to get way more into this, but this is going to be our culotte or our picanha, and then our top sirloin muscle, our center cut top sirloin or top sirloin heart is going to be that center one. So we'll get into exactly how we can break that apart. I think that's what Diana's going to do here in a second. But one of the first things we want to show you is do a little history lesson, right? Talk a little bit how this thing used to be broke down, because it used to be very simple. We used to get this top sirloin in just like this, and it was very easy. We'd come in, and we'd see this, and right, and there's a flat spot here, so why not you just go ahead and make a steak. Make a steak right out of that. Okay, so we get this nice face cut, just like that.
Did you use the word nice to describe that?
I did, but it probably was a little bit of a misspoken word there. You probably shouldn't have said that, because you're right. It doesn't look very good, does it?
No.
It doesn't look good. So the issue here, there's multiple things that are wrong with this, right? Number one, it's huge, okay? Do you need a steak that big for supper? I mean,
I could probably eat it.
I probably could, but I probably don't need to, right? Like that is huge, and just too big of a portion for most people. But that's, I would say, a minor issue when we talk about some of the muscle structure here. One of the things that you can actually notice is our top sirloin, the muscle fibers. So if you look at muscle fibers, muscles are kind of like straws. They're like bundles of straws. Mm-hmm. And whenever we're cutting a steak or whenever we're cutting anything to eat, we want to cut against those straws. We want to cut against them to keep it, it's easier to bite, right?
Yeah.
So if we go in and we cut longitudinal or with the straws, we're going to end up making it tougher for someone to bite.
Yes.
Okay, now, what the problem with cutting it like this is the top sirloin, the top part of this, that's cut pretty good. Okay?
Yeah, it's cut against the grain there.
Yep,
Yeah.
so we're good there. But when you look down here, the picanha or that culotte muscle is actually, now the straws are running this way, okay? They're running the wrong direction. They're not running up towards us like we would expect.
And that, I'd say, is probably the best cut of the top sirloin.
I completely agree. One of my favorites, not my favorite, but one of my favorites is the culotte or the picanha. Put that on a grill, man, it is good.
It is.
So in essence, what we've done here is we've completely ruined the cap muscle. We've completely ruined that culotte. But again, this is how people did it for a very long period of time.
I still even see this in some retail stores.
Yeah,
Not
it
gonna lie.
isn't. Yeah, it's not extinct. Okay, we still do see this, but I would say that there's much better ways to break down a top sirloin.
And keep in mind, so people ask us about pin bone sirloins quite often. This would be that pin bone sirloin, except the bone would still be on there, okay?
Yep.
That hip bone had come around here. So that's why it's really not a desirable cut for this, because you are ruining some of the best cuts on there by cutting that whole face cut like that.
Yep. So let's go ahead and show how we would, I guess, recommend that we go ahead and do this a little bit differently to capture a little bit more. I would say we're adding value to it when we start breaking it down to kind of go against the grain with every cut.
Yes. So that's what we're going to do with this guy right here. So again, you can see all the muscles just kind of are laid out right in front. And you want to make sure that you orient yourself before you start breaking down. So when you get a top sirloin in, you'll have this white fat cap on here. That's to the outside of the animal. So if you're thinking about how does this lay in the animal, so this would actually be going like this. Going that way would be the strip loin, and coming this way would be my round. So my bottom round would actually come off right here. And fun fact, the bottom round and the culotte are exactly the same muscle, okay? The biceps femoris, it just keeps running down. But looking at this, you can see that this is kind of the top side, I'd say, and now I'm going to flip it over and I get this other side. And so you have more lean exposed. You can also see you have some bone feld in there that's running along, because again, like we said over here, this is where that hip bone kind of sat in cupped right there. So we're going to show you how to break this down kind of step by step, so that way you guys can follow along. If you have a top sirloin with you, I recommend you take it out. If not, we'll send you a recording of this, and that way you can watch it later, and you can do this yourself in your own kitchen as well. So first thing first is we got to remove this muscle right here. You can see it on that guy, that darker muscle, okay? So this is referred to as the mouse muscle. Not really sure how it got that name. However, recently on my Instagram, so on Instagram I have a cut of the week that I try to get people to guess, and this was the cut that I put out. And it's really neat because I get people from all over the world responding to these cuts. So I actually had a gentleman from Russia call this the cat's tongue, which I actually prefer it better than the mouse muscle. It's still not marketable whatsoever. However, I think it's more descriptive. It looks kind of like a large cat's tongue. I mean, if I'd have to say so.
Yeah.
I mean, I usually call it the shoe, like the tongue of a shoe. The way you know you're in the right spot, as you pull this back, you have that piece of silver skin that's running down. That's kind of your indicator that you're following along that right seam, and you'll just continue pulling back and cutting. Okay? We talked about this with the chuck roll. Remember, you're always going to try to create some tension on that piece that you're pulling, so that way you can release it. So now we actually have two muscles right here. Okay, and I'm going to separate these two muscles to get down. We have a true quote-unquote mouse muscle, okay? And then this other one. Both of these, most of the time, get thrown into trim. However, if any of you have been watching some of our chefs' Instagram stories here recently, Chef Tony just made some amazing dishes with these mouse muscles here. So this guy right here has a little bit of texture to it. I'll move this just so we can make sure that we're getting a decent shot there. Has a little bit of texture to it, has a little bit more chew, kind of like a skirt steak, so to speak. But if I were to utilize this in a restaurant, I'm trying to utilize all these parts, that to me is kind of like cheek meat. Okay, this is a great opportunity to use this for that type of application. It has a little bit of connective tissue. In all honesty, I've put salt and pepper on it and grilled it, and I was pretty happy with it, just made sure I sliced it against the grain. But you do have and can utilize that piece right there. Now you also, this is my prized possession right here. I really love this mouse muscle. I discovered it while I came here to work at Certified Angus Beef. I was turned on to it, I should say. I did not discover it. But I just think it's got a unique flavor. It's almost a little bit gamey in flavor, but it just is so tender. It's just one of my favorites. And the fact that it's really not utilized at all makes me want it to become popular. So that's why I am very, very happy with one of our restaurant partners, Joey, in Canada, because they actually do utilize this on their menu. Many of you may not know, and I know we have some Canadian viewers here today, but the top sirloin is fairly popular in Canada. They know this cut very well, and so they treat it with the respect that it deserves. So they utilize a lot of those center cuts, which we'll get to, those center cut top sirloins, meaning that they have a lot of these left over as trim. Well, Joey actually was able to work with one of our distributors to have them start fabbing these out and saving them for them. So they actually have this on their menu as an entree. It's a 6-ounce portion, and it does fairly well, and it's actually pretty amazing. And I'm very excited to see that on there. So essentially, one man's trash is another man's treasure. This is something that usually would be thrown into grinds, but people are utilizing it on the menu. Now, I wouldn't say buy in all these top sirloins just to get this piece. But if you're buying in top sirloins already, you might as well utilize these two pieces as a special or an appetizer on the menu where you can use some smaller portion sizes and feed more people. Just a great opportunity there.
Yeah, that's I would say key here is that, and we don't want to mislead you because this is not something that I would say is easily accessible, right? It's not something that we can get too easy, but what we can get is a whole top sirloin, and we can take it right off the top sirloin, and we do that. And that's, I believe when you're finished, we'll actually have some different menu applications that we'll be following up with you on for some of these, and they have included some things, some different ideas for the mouse muscle, and why we did that is because some people might be buying in this whole top sirloin and need something to utilize that for. So that's what we have some ideas there.
Yes. And so now we have our center cut right there and the culotte right here, okay? So what you want to do, I say this is the eye and that's the eyebrow. So you want to remove that eyebrow. You simply just start to pull down. You might need to use your knife right here because that fat just gets a little bit thick, but just to continue to pull down and back and remove that culotte.
So expertise-wise to do this, it really doesn't take, I would say, a lot, right? This one probably is a little bit easier than than some of the other cuts that we can break down. This one just, it really does not take much know-how or practice to get really good at this. Some of other cuts, I would say that might not be the case, but this is one I would say it's fairly simple. Now, on the other flip side of things, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is I would say yield is probably not exactly the best when it comes to the top sirloin. We do have quite a bit of trim, and we'll show you what our pile looks like when we're done, but that's something to keep in mind.
And I'm making sure to kind of save all this so that way you guys can see that trim. So from here, do you want to cut the culotte? Since you don't need an expert to cut, apparently, so I think you can handle it.
So we're just going to go ahead, and again, this is one of my favorites. So we're just going to go ahead and trim that off. Now, this, you could get this a couple different ways. This is going to be taken a lot by our Brazilian steakhouses. They love the picanha, right?
Yes.
So they're going to actually, the most common way that you'll see this cooked there is fat cap on. And I'll show you, if you flip this over, we still have a fat cap on the other side of it. Now, again, if we go back to what I was saying earlier, and you can actually see here, I'm going to put it there. You can actually see here the muscles, the striations there. That right there, that is exactly what, before we cut this like this, okay? Mm-hmm. That's going with the grain. That creates a problem. Yes. Now we have, since we've separated it off, we can go ahead and cut this against the grain and make really good steaks. So we can go ahead and pull some of the silver skin off of this.
And note too, so that silver skin actually extends all the way through this cut, but it starts to thin out a little bit more as we go further back. So you just have to remove it on that front side. You don't need to worry about removing it down there. We actually had a group from Mexico not too long ago. Well, now it's been a long time ago, but they told me that they actually, when they go to sell this, even at a restaurant, this portion is more expensive than this one because they know that this one's going to eat better and be more tender because it has less of that connected tissue in there, which is kind of neat. That's how delicate this cut is to them, that they really do notice the difference from end to end, which is cool.
And this is, now we have it, this is still fat cap on, okay? And this, I would say, is the more common way. You'll find it at Brazilian steakhouses. They like to leave that fat cap on because it helps with their cooking method. You often see it kind of skewer going through it, kind of make a little C out of it, and so that's very common there. Now we can remove the culotte, and that, I would say, for most other applications, that's probably the more common way that we'd find this or purchase it in, and it's pretty simple to do there.
If though you want to make sure that you're getting your fat cap on, specify. Please specify with your distributor, because if you just say, I want a culotte, a lot of times they will give you a fat cap off culotte, okay? So if you want that fat cap on, you need to tell them that, okay? Be very, very specific in what you're ordering. And to any of our distributors out there, ask, okay? If they just ask for a culotte, ask them what they are doing with it. So you know, do I need to give them a fat cap on? Are they rotated whole? Are they trying to do that Brazilian steakhouse application? Maybe they're cutting it into steaks. And so when they cut it into steaks, sometimes you're gonna want that fat cap on there. It's very, very good to ask and be specific in what you're ordering and what you're asking for.
I personally think one of the cool things with this, when you do cook it, if putting it on a grill or so forth, what's kind of neat is it actually plumps up when it cooks, which is kind of a little fun fact that's pretty cool with it. But this really is a really good cut. We're going to talk a little bit more about the different ways that you could get this, but this is what a culotte would look like, or a picanha.
One thing that Chef Tony has done here multiple times, actually, he calls it a culox that he makes out of this cut. He'll take this and put salt, pepper, juniper berries. He'll put a lot of citrus in there. Just let it sit in that cure for about a month, in all honesty. And then from there, we take it out and we wrap it in this collagen paper and we hang it up to dry in our dry aging cabinet. And then we let that get pretty dried out and we're able to peel back that paper and then you could slice it thin. And he tried to make, essentially, it's a beef prosciutto because we still leave that fat cap on there. We've tried it with other cuts, kind of that beef prosciutto type thing, but this is the best cut that we've seen where the fat really still holds together. A lot of times that fat will start to fall apart. So it's really, it's a lot of fun, and you could really taste those citrus flavors, really, whatever you're adding in. So if you want to know more about that, please feel free to ask us. I know Chef Tony has given out that recipe to many people, and so many that have come to the center love it, okay? So now we're going to take the remaining part of this top sirloin. So this is our top sirloin center cut. We still have quite a bit of fat on here, so I'm going to go ahead and trim this off. Okay, but I'm not going to trim too deeply because I want to make sure my yields stay fairly good. One thing to think about as I'm trimming is dry aging. Okay, so this cut you could see does have a lot of protection in terms of fat. So it is utilized in a lot of different dry aging places. And the fact that how Clint showed us that the price on it is fairly steady throughout the year, it is a great option for a lower end dry aging cut, or say lower value. I wouldn't say lower end, but a lower value dry aging cut.
Now, when she's talking about a dry aged top sirloin, we typically would not want to dry age, say, a sirloin heart. We're talking about an entire full sirloin.
Yes, the more protection you could have on it with fat, the better it is going to be.
Yep, exactly. The other thing to point out here is you notice that the more cuts that we do and we start to break these muscle apart, there is some fat in between each layer. There's some collagen, connective tissue in between each layer that need to be trimmed. So the more cuts that we make and the further we go down, we're actually going to be hurting our yield a little bit, right? So that's something to think about. When we did the whole face cut, okay, we are probably yielding the best, but we definitely are not making the best cuts in terms of eating quality. So there's a difference there.
So now we're left with this center cut, okay? And you can see that there's this line that's right down. It's really, really awesome. The animal kind of just drew it there for you. This is actually where the sciatic nerve sat in the animal, which means there's a lot of connective tissue that sits in the middle of that. If you remember back to that face cut, you could actually see that really heavy piece of connective tissue that's in the middle there. So this runs through all the different steaks, that really heavy piece of silver skin, and that just adds a chewy bite to that piece. So coming back here, I'm gonna just pull back a little bit and use my knife to try to run through and find that silver skin. This might be, I'd say, the hardest part about breaking down the top sirloin, but once you do it a few times, it's really not too terrible. You just have to go really, really slow and kind of get that knife through, and then once you find that seam, you can separate it, and now you've exposed that silver skin on each side here. So now I'm going to go in with my knife and remove that silver skin, because that's just going to be chewy stuff, and we don't want to have chewy stuff in a steak, especially a middle meat, okay? So we want to get rid of that. I could come over here too and just kind of peel this back down a little bit. I like to make things look pretty, so I just try to keep them in good shape. That's still good lean right there, but this guy looks pretty great right there, all right? And then we have this one. You can still see I've got some silver skin in there, so I'm going to come in again with my knife and remove that silver skin and really just make this a far more premium cut.
Let's compare here. So we got this cut here, now that versus that cut. Okay, what looks better? Okay, to me, I mean this it's not even a question. This right here is more premium than this big hunk of meat that's not even going to eat that well because we haven't cut it correctly.
Well, I mean, it's going to eat pretty good. It's certified as beef. So.
That's true, but
Just saying.
we definitely could improve it.
We could do better.
Yes.
We could definitely do better. That's for sure.
So
let's make these even a little bit better. These are roasts. Okay, so thinking about this, sirloin chateau. Okay, you don't want to always use that tenderloin because it can get really expensive, especially during the holiday season. This is a great option for that. You can even take this and split it down the middle, and then you have two more of these. Chef Peter is so good at doing this, and then he'll take these even on a carving station and slice thin. They hold up really, really well, and it's great because then you're only pulling out some smaller pieces on that carving board. You don't have to have such a large piece to carve against.
Plus, it's almost perfectly symmetrical. So when you put it on a plate, you have this really nice, I mean, it looks just like a fillet, right? You carve that off. Yeah, make a steak out of it.
Let's look at this tenderloin fillet. Wait, I'm just kidding. Top sirloin fillet. Did anyone catch that? If anyone's paying attention.
Okay, you can see there.
Look at that marbling
Yeah.
in this. Oh
This
my
is-
gosh.
This is fantastic. I mean, it does. It really does resemble, like she said, a tenderloin filet. A filet mignon is what this does. But is it anywhere near the price? As Clint showed earlier, no. Okay, it's not. It's not near the price. And I will say, you can't bite this and think you're going to get the tenderloin. It's not the same.
That's
but
actually
they look really
a
good.
really good point. So your tenderloin is always going to be more tender than your top sirloin filet, without question. However, one thing you really need to note is the age on your top sirloin. A lot of our distributors, well, as certified Angus beef, we recommend that they age it at a minimum of 21 days. A lot of our distributor partners actually take this extra to 28 days. They want to add a little bit more time on there, and that's what we want. I even know of quite a few distributors that want to take it to 35 days, which is awesome. But make sure you're working with your distributors to get that extra age on your product. And if it comes in and you see that it's only at 21 days, hold off on cutting it for a while. A fun fact that happened here at the Culinary Center, we got some product directly from Packer, and we got it in, and it was exactly 21 days aged, these top sirloins. I cut it, the guests had it, and I will admit, it was a little chewy. Not terrible, but it ate like a top sirloin would. Okay, so the chefs, of course, were upset because they don't serve anything chewy here. They're very good at that. Well, we had an event 2 weeks later that required top sirloin. I used the top sirloins from that exact same box. I did not tell them this, but from that exact same box, and they served those, and they were 100% different. Just by having a little bit more age on it, it really does it better. And we recommend the top sirloin specifically, again, having that 28 days of age. So it just had that extra 7 days, just adds that more tenderness to it. It allows those cow panes to break it down and make it more tender. Okay? So now from here, we've got this remaining 2/3 cut. So this would be the 1/3 of the whole top sirloin center cut. This is 2/3. Like I said before, you could split that and cut some more of these. These are also called baseball steaks. Cut some more of these baseball steaks or top sirloin fillets. Or I could take this and just cut a straight top sirloin steak. This would be more of your 10 to 12 ounce sirloin steak that you'd see on some menus. They're definitely a little bit larger of a steak and thinner cut, but they still do have tremendous eating experience and great marbling. Did you see him move his hand there? He's a little bit afraid that I was going to cut him. It's like the trust is gone or something. But we just continue just to cut down. I just want to shape these a little bit. You don't have to do that, but I just think that these look, these look incredible.
They really
do.
Look at the
Gosh.
marbling in there. I mean, these really are. And the other cool part about this is the top sirloin really carries a lot of flavor.
It does.
Right? So, I mean, that's kind of, when you tenderloin, I feel like there's some give and take. Very, very tender, but you don't have quite the flavor that you have in some of the other cuts. This is still a pretty tender, pretty good cut, but it also has added flavor that just makes it a really nice cut for a very affordable price.
Yeah, and maybe you're looking for that steak, because I know some people are trying to do a lot of takeout, but steak as a takeout option can get kind of expensive. Well, if you use a cut that's not as expensive when you're bringing it in, this could really put you in the game to have more people ordering some steaks as their takeout item. Okay? And then it's going to give you a little bit more profit on that end as well.
Yep.
So that's why this is a great option to really think about utilizing too. Okay?
Now, let's talk a little bit about yield. I think you're done doing that. Look at the piles that we have built up, right? We have some saleable product, okay?
I could use this in ground.
Yeah,
grinds.
these top two, you might be able to make a mini depending on how much you're actually working through, or you might need to grind those as well. But then we have that over there.
I could
that's-
render it down and make some beef fat candles.
You could make beef fat candles. You actually have rendered down fat and put it into a pie.
Yes,
so
pie crust.
maybe some apple pie. But in reality, the value there is pretty low, right? So there's some other options that we
What
have.
would you say your yield is? 75% cutting yield?
No.
80%?
Yeah.
Roughly. Just so you're aware when you're bringing it in, if you do want to do some fabrication, I know it takes a little bit more time and that you'll have some of that trim to deal with. But the good part is that we have some other options as well.
Yeah, you can order this thing in so many different ways, and that's what we want to kind of talk a little bit about next. So we've actually got all the different ways that you can order in a top sirloin, and we're going to kind of walk through each one. So Clint's gonna kind of help us explain what these are. But let's start up here. Right in front of us, we have a whole top sirloin.
Be right here.
Okay, that whole top sirloin is like what we just did here, right? You can take that, you can break it down. You're gonna have some yield loss associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, for sure. From there, then, the next step down would be exactly what they did on primarily splitting apart the center cut top sirloin from the culotte. And so one of those in each, a center cut top sirloin and a culotte in equal proportions in the box. So whether that be 5 or 6 pieces of each put in the box would be kind of the next step down from that.
Yep.
And then, of course, if you can order those pieces individually, okay, well then you can, but in the same box, then you can also order them individually. So then we go to just a center cut by itself, or just a culotte by itself would be the next component of there that we'd see. So those are kind of the basics, especially when you're ordering in master cases. Those are kind of your basic options. And again, as Daniel shared, it comes back to how much yield that we're looking to deal with, what's our access to skilled labor within our operation to be able to go through this and so forth. And of course, that yield and so forth is going to have an impact on the ultimate price points. So from there then, we also go back to what we see now on the detailed board as far as the actual portioned steaks that are available. Di, would you run through those?
Yeah, I can talk about these a little bit. So these are kind of what we showed you guys before, just within, but this is what you could actually you'd work with your distributors, their cut shop specifically that would get those. The ones that Clint walked through, your distributor can cut some of those, and they might actually. Some of these we did get cut by our distributor, but they can also come straight from the packing plant, and the distributor would just hand off that case to you. They'd kind of be the middleman in that. But these are going to go ahead and fabricate. So you can get these kind of your 1/3, 2/3 cuts. Now, some distributors will say, okay, we are only going to cut baseball steaks out of this part right here, because there is some thought that this is more tender than this. I say thought because we actually did a study here internally, and there was no statistical difference between these two cuts in terms of tenderness. They were exactly the same. However, some people do find that to be more tender, and I will even say cutting-wise, it does feel more tender, but the consumer is not going to notice a difference between the two. But these are where you can order these in, that 1/3, 2/3 cut. You can cut baseball steaks out of them. You can leave them as whole and chateaus. You can roast them. You can even roast this like this. You don't need to split it in half. Okay, then we have, this is kind of what our new full face top sirloin. So that was when these two were together still, we just cut that straight back. So you will have a little bit of challenge of having that connective tissue that sits in there, and that will run through the whole piece, but it is minimal, and you can always ask to get these tenderized. I definitely would do that on a top sirloin. A lot of your distributors are going to do it automatically because it doesn't hurt it at all to have it have a little bit extra tenderness to it, and that should take care of that connective tissue there. At this top corner right here, those are actually our baseball steaks. So we cut those out of this 1/3 piece right here. So I'll lay that there so you can see that. And then these are our top 2/3 steaks. So you can see how we get some sizing differences as well, which is great to see within the top sirloin, that you can have those variations in size, because you can go from a 4-ounce steak all the way up to a 12-ounce steak just with one cut of meat. So you can really appease a lot of your customers just by having this one cut. And then finally, we have our culotte steaks. I mean, those things just look beautiful. They've been sitting out here for about an hour, and they still have a ton of marbling. They've bloomed really well. I mean, they really are incredible. I love having that little fat cap on there. And here's quite a fun fact, or one that I like to throw out a lot. So culotte, also a lot of people call it a rump steak. I've seen that often. The Hereford House down in Florida actually purchases certified Angus beef and has it on their menu, okay? It's fun for Angus people because Hereford House, okay? If you don't get that, it's fine. Just talk to us later. But those are all the cuts that you can get. So you can see there's a lot of merchandising. You don't have to do all of this cut work yourself. You can get this directly from your distributor. They're willing to do that, to kind of take off that cutting ease. We just wanted to show you all the opportunities that you have within this top sirloin.
Di, is it fair to say, too, that when we think about the flexibility and specifically on portion size, that all menus of all shapes and sizes, that within this cut, really anything is possible.
Oh yeah, I think that's the coolest part about it, is the versatility within there. So you could hit on so many different points within that menu.
Yep. I do want to pause just and back up for just a quick second. While we can't see each and every one of your smiling faces that are joining us today, we do want to make sure you've got the opportunity to ask questions. So please, we do have somebody monitoring the comment section. And so if you do have some specific questions, more than happy here before we wrap up, please go ahead and put those questions into the comments, and we'll get those out here as well. While we're potentially waiting for a few questions to roll in, just kind of some additional trivia as we think about what we see as the brand, and specifically going back to 2019 as kind of a period in time that was unaffected by all these other issues that we've been dealing with, and looking at what do most restaurateurs that are using certified Angus beef, top sirloins today, how are they bringing it in? And what our numbers would suggest is about 55 to 60% are probably bringing in the pre-cut portion product. We do have then about 35 to 40% that are still bringing in the whole top sirloin and doing that work themselves, okay, and managing that yield. Potentially they have multiple menu applications so they can use those different cuts and so forth. And then that remaining 10% would essentially be just culottes only. So very likely that it could be a Brazilian concept or something along those lines where they have really focused in on the culotte itself. So, Ken?
Clint and Diana, Daniel, one of the questions we had was, thinking about our brand extensions. We've got Certified Angus Beef Prime, Certified Angus Beef Natural, and Certified Angus Beef Prime Natural. Are you guys able to source these cuts in those other extensions that we have?
Yeah, I'll take that one. The short answer is yes, absolutely. While there may be some variation from one supplier to another, ultimately, absolutely. In both the Certified Angus Beef brand Prime, as well as the natural brand extensions, the top sirloin would be a fundamental cut in both of those extensions. And then again, the portion and the different variations that we see here would absolutely be available. And I think if you have somebody that has customarily been using Certified Angus Beef traditional product, and they've been thinking about a leap into either the Prime or the natural brand extension, the top sirloin, for a number of reasons, not the least of which would be price point, is a good way to make that leap forward.
I would argue that the prime, top sirloin and prime extension is the way to go, right?
Yeah.
That's where you get more marbling. It's not that, like you just said, it's not that big difference in price. That's where it's at, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
Yeah, very good.
How about from a labor standpoint? Diana and Daniel, you guys have certainly broken down a few of these. How long does it typically take to get to where you guys got to on the baseball steaks, the culotte steaks?
In all honesty, it's not too bad. So before this started, before the show started, I should say, Daniel and I just went in back and broke down 3 of them in about 30 minutes or so. So I mean, it's really not, and that was going down into steaks and everything. So it's really not too terrible. Even last week, Chef Ashley had to break some down. She just took a whole case, and she said, by the time I got to the last one, it was nothing. So really, once you just get the hang of it and working through it, it's really not too bad. I mean, we just got an email from Joe the Butcher out in California just this past week, and he said of how many he's broken down over his time, and really you just become comfortable with it, and it's kind of like riding a bike too.
Yeah, I will add on to that though, that currently I think everyone out there is probably facing labor shortages, right?
Yeah, that's
so,
true.
I mean, that's something to keep in mind too, is it might not be the hardest thing to cut. It might be actually fairly simple, but labor is hard to come by in these days, which again, I would point us right back to
The portion control.
portion controlled cuts that we have. That can save you a lot of headache.
And then inventory control too is all in one. Yeah.
So we did have a question come in and it asked, what is the simplest way to have a discussion on the top sirloin with a customer who might be interested? And, from my standpoint, I would always, start with possibly a special from a sales perspective. I mean, if you're not using this cut right now, what a great opportunity to use it as a special right now. Try a case, throw it on for the weekend, and see how it performs. How about you guys? Any perspective on the best way to go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. It's just getting them to try the product initially is just the biggest hurdle. But once they do try it, I think it's simple. I mean, these really can, especially these sirloin fillets, the price point is right there. It has the word fillet in it when you call it a sirloin fillet on your menu. So I think it's really marketable. I mean, you've got some great flavor in there too, the marbling. If they just give that a try, it's going to sell. And that's the beauty of it. Like we were saying, with the labor shortages, with these challenges of people going out to restaurants or ordering a steak for takeout, these are kind of more in that ballpark where it's more comfortable for them to do right now. So that's why I think this is a great option. And when you use certified Angus beef, it's still a premium steak too.
Plus, on top of that, I would say that you are also right now trying to get people, they want to bring in a single cut and then utilize it in many different ways,
Yeah.
right? All sorts of ways on the menu. This is like one of the best cuts for that, simply because we can go everything from this premium center of the plate type option to we could just put it on a salad, sirloin
Yeah.
salad, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really you can go all over the board on that.
Another question came in asking on your guys' opinion on jacquarding versus not jacquarding.
I'm never going to complain about it. I mean, it's not a bad thing. It makes the product more tender for sure. From a food safety standpoint, as long as that equipment is cleaned appropriately, it's a great option. I will say I would rely more on a distributor to jacquard it than I would do it myself because they have better equipment, better sanitizers to clean all their tools versus doing it in-house. Totally can do it, but their machines are by far more precise than what that hand jacquard would do, and it takes them 2 seconds to do it. So it's never going to hurt the product. It's only going to help it by doing so.
Ooh, I love this question. Is this a great product to introduce as certified Angus beef prime?
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier.
Yes.
Absolutely. We would wholeheartedly, we preach that all the time.
We kind of say it's like
Yeah.
a gateway drug. to
Yeah,
certified
it
Angus
is.
beef prime.
If you're wanting to get prime on a menu, right here it is. And that's what Clint was saying earlier. There just isn't a big difference in the prime versus choice price on this, so why not?
Yeah.
And I had another question here. It says, what are the weights of the top sirloin typically?
Oh, that's a good question. So average weight, would I say 5 to 7 pounds? I'm looking at Clint on this one.
Well, so if they're talking about all the way up to the full top sirloin, I believe we're going to average somewhere around 13 and a half
Okay.
pounds. And so that's going to be a range of, the extremely light ones, maybe 10 pounds. Your fabricator is going to have some impact on that. And maybe up to 16, 17 pounds for the large ones. But on average, it's about a 13 to 14 pound cut. As we get separated down then, from a culotte standpoint, a 1.5 pounds to 3 pounds, again, depending on the size of the carcass that it was fabricated. And then in that 4 to 5 pound range for the center cut, top sirloin would be more or less kind of the averages. Good question.
From the packer level, does that culotte typically come with the fat off or fat on? I guess from the packer to the distributor is, I think, what that question is referencing.
Buyer's choice. Buyer's choice. Just as I specified earlier, coming from the distributor, the packer would be the same way. They can do those as, I think we've been referring to them as fat off or peeled culottes would be the common terminology, or a fat on culotte. So yeah, buyer's choice.
And then regarding the grain on culotte, what is the best way to portion for skewers sliced table side?
So wait, so let me just clarify. So it's going to be skewered, and then they're slicing those skewers table side.
Yeah, it sounds incredible.
So, yeah, I would still, if you're skewering it, and you're skewering the whole thing, right? And you're not like kebabbing it or anything. You're skewering the whole thing, and you're slicing it table side. So if I do it like this, that's still going to be cutting it with the grain. However, it's also going to be slow roasted and broken down. But when you give them this long piece like that, and it's going to be thin, so that if you're carving it this way, it's going to be a long, thin piece, they're probably going to take it and cut it against the grain to cut those smaller bites while they're eating it. I highly doubt they're going to cut long strips that way to eat it. So I do think it's totally fine just to roll it up like that and skewer it. Otherwise, kind of rolling it like this, you can try to do that. But I think that's going to be much harder to skewer at the same time. So,
How about kebabs? Would you think it'd be a better option for a kebab versus a skewer?
Yeah, you could definitely do those kebab chunks on there, and then they could go ahead and cut those. If they're small enough, those cubes, you could just slice some kind of larger steaks and then chunk that up a little bit, and then they would cut those back. So that would be a good option. Yeah.
All right, and then I think we've got time for one more. It says, what is the most ideal use for trim? Is it typically used for grinds? I guess if there's another option to not use it for grinds, what would that be?
I mean, I would definitely say grinds. I mean, you could use it for ground beef, for burgers. You could use it for charcuterie. You can make your own sausages.
Sausage making.
Yeah.
You'll notice that the trim is so fine. You can't. It's not like we can make kebab meat out of this or anything like that. You really can only grind it because that's all we really. There's just not much usable other than any other way.
Yeah.
Very good. Clint, did you have anything else or anything else you guys want to add or before we close up here?
I think that's it.
Very good. Well, we appreciate your guys' time here. Just wanted to leave with a couple notes before we sign off. Go out and try a top sirloin. Buy it. If you're an operator and you're not using top sirloin now, try something. Try a full case and break it down yourself or get a portion cut. But go ahead and use it. Just like that question we had about when to approach a customer or how to approach a customer. You put it on a special. This is a great cut to use for a special. We also have a new merchandising sheet that you'll be getting in an email all about the top sirloin. There's a lot of good information in here, kind of going over with some visual diagrams of what Diana and Daniel just did. And then also some excellent menu applications on the back of that. A couple of my favorites, a Korean pancake with shredded beef. That sounds amazing. Charcoal crusted beef carpaccio with lump crab, ciabatta panini, and some smoked Santa Maria style. And not to mention our culinary team, including some amazing cuts that they put together, or dishes that they put together using these cuts, which will be also in that email that you receive following this session. Our next Live with the Brand will be held on March 10th, 2021, and we will be focusing on the rib. We're going to show you a lot of new ideas to market the rib in your restaurant or establishment. There's going to be a lot of fun stuff on that. Look for details as well in that email to follow up. And lastly, thank you guys so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again on the next one. Take care.